Ladies and gentlemen, welcome and thank you for joining us for the 2022 March for Life theme debut briefing. To begin today's program, please welcome the President of the Heritage Foundation, Kay Coles James.
First of all, let me welcome you to the Heritage Foundation. What some of you who are younger may not know is that my entry into public policy was through the pro-life movement. Years and years ago, and I like to tell people it was back when I was skinny and cute, I got a call and I was asked if I would go in and debate the life issue with a representative from Planned Parenthood. Probably the most controversial thing I'd ever debated at that particular point in my life was standing in front of the refrigerator as a housewife and determining, should it be chicken or hamburger for dinner? And that was about as controversial as it got. But there was something going on in our country, and particularly something going on in our family, where my young son saw pictures of preborn children who had been destroyed in the womb and thrown in a trash can. Found those pictures in our home and said, Mom, what is this? Imagine trying to have to explain abortion to a child. And I did the best I could in that moment to explain to him exactly what he was looking at. And when you're that age, you think mom and dad can change the world or do anything. By the time they get to junior high, they know better. And he looked at me and said, Mommy, why don't you make them stop? This is wrong. And I promised my young son that given the opportunity to use my voice to speak into that, I would. Thinking that it wouldn't mean very much, but a quick promise to get him to eat his breakfast and move on. And several days later, the opportunity came. I said no and explained it at the dinner table that someone actually asked me to go on television and debate a woman from Planned Parenthood. And that little voice said, What did you say, Mommy? And I said, Oh, I told them I'm sure they could find someone much better to do that. And he said, But Mom, you promised. You promised. And so because of that, I stepped into the fray, have never looked back. And as I'm planning leaving the Heritage Foundation in a few short weeks, the question comes up frequently, so what's next? Are you going to do anything? Are you taking a long vacation? What does that look like? And I reminded people of something that I said almost 20 years ago now. I cannot imagine what would drive me to get out of bed at 80 years old with creaky knees, and I'm not there yet. And I said, the life issue is one that I care so deeply about. I'm sure that I will finish where I started. And that is fighting this particular issue. So yes, the portfolio widened and I took on lots of other issues, but at my heart, at the very heart, is fighting for the right to life of preborn children in our country, for the elderly, for those who are born with disabilities, because you see, the sanctity of life issue is far more than just being about abortion. And anyone in the media who ever referred to me as an anti-abortionist, I said to them immediately, that comment right there lets me know you have no idea who I am. Because I believe in the value and the dignity and the sanctity of human life from the moment of conception until death. I am not anti-abortion. I am pro-life. And so, ladies and gentlemen, in my final days at Heritage, I cannot tell you how thrilled I am to host you here this morning for this important panel and this important conversation. Growing up in the pro-life movement, there was nothing more significant than taking my children to the March for Life, having them understand what it meant to care about something deeply and then go and march for what they believed in. And I believe that there's an entire generation of young people who have been inspired by the March for Life. That young kid that asked me that question and propelled me into the pro-life movement ended up, as an attorney, chief deputy, attorney general, was at the Justice Department. And I think it's important to understand that what was embedded in him as we held hands and marched for life affected him and my other children as well. I have one son that's so woke, I wish he'd go back to sleep. But one issue he doesn't waver on in all his wokeness is the life issue. The life issue. And so, welcome here today. You are going to hear from some very inspiring speakers, and I want to welcome my dear friend to the stage to talk to you about the March for Life and the big reveal.
I want to thank Kay for hosting us today and Heritage, but also not only for her terrific leadership these past years, since 2018, I think, here at Heritage, but her decades of leadership, whether it's at the state or federal level, leading on these and so many other issues near and dear to our heart. So I can't wait to see where the adventure continues. And we hope that it's very close to the March for Life. So you are near and dear to our heart. And again, thank you to our friends, Heritage Foundation, for so graciously hosting us here today. We're just delighted to be with you. I am Jeannie Mancini. I'm honored to be president of the March for Life. And I'm excited to talk with you today about our 49th annual March for Life. It's hard to believe that it's our 49th annual March for Life. And yet, this is a historic year, and there's so much ahead of us this year, and I think this will be a very special March for Life, and I'm very interested in our theme, and I hope that you are too. So let me tell you a little bit more about that. Over the course of the past few years, from the halls of Congress to our dining room tables, Americans have been discussing the meaning of equality, right? The term, it's invoked often, but it's rarely defined. So we're hearing things about COVID-19 pandemic, about racial injustice. We're hearing about all sorts of subjects where this is evoked. And these discussions are crucial for America and for the health of our country. But I would offer that they lack one critical element. So while nearly everyone seems to agree that the topic of equality is important, there's little agreement on what the definition of equality is and who it applies to, and how that should be applied to important policy questions. And so with that in mind, and taking that sort of conversation, that cultural conversation as a springboard, the March for Life has chosen equality begins in the womb as our theme this year. We want to expand this debate, this rigorous debate about equality, to include unborn children who are often overlooked because they cannot speak for themselves. There is real value in our culture recognizing the inherent dignity of every human life. And of course, when it comes to this inherent human dignity, things like skin color don't matter, disability status, socioeconomic background doesn't matter. What matters is the fact that each of us is a human being and that we have inherent human dignity because of who we are in our essence. What matters is that life is precious, and that because it has this inherent human dignity, that it should be protected from the moment of conception or fertilization. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, including in the womb. The upcoming Supreme Court case, Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, will, I believe, have a major impact on the unborn and on equality being in the womb, on protecting the smallest citizens that don't have a voice. Our hope and our prayer is that this year's theme, Equality Begins in the Womb, will allow not only for hearts and minds to be changed, because that is our greatest, most lofty goal, right? Knowing that culture is upstream of politics, that hearts and minds will be convinced of the inherent dignity of the human person from conception, but that there will also be included in this robust debate the topic of the unborn child. Not only debate, but laws as well, and that unborn child will be legally protected in our country. So I welcome you here. I thank you for being here. I pray that you'll join us throughout this year as we continue this conversation. And in typical March for Life fashion, I'd like to now introduce this theme through a short little fun video. So you can turn your eyes to the screens around us here.
Hear that, Mom? My heart is beating so fast. Do you have hands too? I wonder what they will do. Is your heart beating too? I can hear it, just like mine. Do you feel that, Mom? I'm getting stronger. Can you sing to me again? I love listening to your voice. Will I see you soon? I can't wait any longer to meet you. I can finally see you. And you know what? You're just like me.
Equality begins in the womb. We have a stellar lineup of panelists who are going to tackle this theme from different angles today. I'm going to begin by introducing our first panelist. I'm sorry to say that, like so many others, she got to the airport yesterday, and her flight was first delayed and then canceled, unfortunately. So Dr. Gracie Christie from Miami has sent in a video, which will still be incredible. But let me just introduce her before we show the video. So Dr. Gracie is a policy advisor for the Catholic Association. She writes and speaks in both Spanish and English about Catholicism, religious freedom, and the intersection of faith and science. As a Hispanic, she brings a special focus on social issues that affect the growing Latino population, such as the state of the family, the real needs of the poor and the marginalized, and of course, the poorest of the poor, the unborn. As a physician, she's able to address complex subjects relating to government health policy and its true impact on the people it purports to help. Dr. Gracie Christie grew up in Guadalajara, Mexico, coming to the U.S. at the age of 11. She's a graduate of Columbia University and the University of Miami School of Medicine. She practices radiology, and so every day has a window into the womb. And she's going to show us lots of images today in her presentation. So she does so in Miami, where she lives with her husband and 5 children. So without further ado, if we could see this video from Gracie, please.
Thank you so much to the March for Life for inviting me. I'm very sorry I'm not there in person. I was very much looking forward to it. But in my defense, I sat in a plane in Miami for 2.5 hours before it took off. It finally didn't take off, and we were asked to deplane, and I just couldn't get there on time. So I've come home to my own office, and I'm recording this short video of my remarks that I was planning to make, and I hope it's okay. I hope it's okay, and that you enjoy them. So thank you so much for inviting me to help debut this year's March for Life theme. It's a delight for me to participate in the March for Life in any way, shape, or form, because the March is a fabulous organization that not only treats the whole world to the sight of hundreds of thousands of people, joyful, happy, gloriously alive people, fighting, totally devoted to that wonderful battle that we are all fighting for the dignity of human beings, but also fills those same people with that knowledge that there are so many happy soldiers in this most important fight of our lives. Of course, there is sadness at the march too. So many of those marching carry the wounds of abortion on their souls, sometimes personally, sometimes because of a friend or a sister or someone they loved. And these are wounds that find healing at the march because it's a love march, and love is the best balm for every wound, and especially the greatest hurts. This year, the theme of the march, Equality Begins in the Womb, was tailor-made for me. That's because equality is the noble idea that all humans, all people are equal in worth, in dignity, no matter what physical or social differences may separate them. This is a vital part of my work as a physician. I'm ethically compelled to treat each one of my patients with equal care corresponding to their equal dignity. Each one of my patients is a person, each one infinitely valuable, no exceptions. I'm a radiologist, and part of what I do is obstetric ultrasound, in which every day we put down an ultrasound probe on the swelling belly of a pregnant mother, a pregnant woman, and she is my patient, and I care for her in conjunction with her OB, and we want to bring her through her pregnancy safely, healthy, strong, full of life, confident, and happy. But what do we see on our screen when we put the ultrasound probe down in black and white and sometimes in color? We see our other patient, the other human being in the room, the hidden one, at least hidden to the naked eye, but we don't have a naked eye anymore. We have ultrasound. And with that brilliant modality, which was developed originally to find submarines in the darkness of the deep sea, we are able to look inside the womb and glance around the darkness of the uterus, in which a tiny little person is well embarked on the voyage of life. Separate, distinct, with her own future, her own destiny, her own DNA, a self-directed being, equal in worth to you and I, even when only as long as your fingernail. We, the human race, we, have always known that inside a pregnant mother is her little son or daughter, or perhaps twins, or more, that one day they would see the light of day and break forth with that first cry of shock at the cold air and the bright lights of the outside world. But in the interest of sexual freedom in 1973, we quibbled over the question of when does life begin? Justice Blackmun wrote in his Roe decision that at that point in the development of man's knowledge, there was simply no consensus as to the question of when life begins. In other words, the fetus could not be said to be with any certainty alive, and therefore was not worthy of any legal protection. We all know about the carnage that followed, that has resulted. After that, our battlefields are littered with numberless tiny skeletons and shattered hearts. It is high time to re-examine the premise of Roe, a case based on a claim about science. As a diagnostic radiologist whose youngest patients are fetuses who are very much alive and very human, and in the interest of the welfare of these young people, I submitted an amicus brief urging the court to overturn Roe. I was joined by two other female physicians, a neonatologist and an obstetrician, who also value their baby patients and believe that whether they're inside their mothers or outside, premature or full term, they all deserve our care and protection equally. In defense of Justice Blackmun, the ultrasound technology I work with every day was in its infancy in the 1970s, and there was consequently much more room for debate and general uncertainty about the life of the child in the womb. More than any other scientific advance, it was ultrasound that opened a window on the womb that was closed 50 years ago. Pioneered in 1958, the first machines were enormous and very difficult to operate, and the images were very difficult to read. But as the years went on, ultrasound of the fetus became democratized, and more and more we have been able to expand that. And now, what is more common than seeing on the refrigerators of expectant parents everywhere and expectant grandparents and aunts and uncles? than a black and white photo of a baby on the way. Perfectly apparent now to the justices sitting on the court, to all of us, to the wider public, is the humanity, the liveliness and humanity of babies at 15 weeks of gestation. This is the age at which Mississippi proposes to protect them, and the case and the age at which the Supreme Court is thinking of protecting them if we win that case. Nestled within their mothers, these fetuses' average length is 6.4 inches and average weight is only 4 ounces. They are recognizably human on ultrasound with the proportions of a newborn, seemingly all head and rounded belly. The major organs are formed and functioning, and they are practicing for extra uterine life, although the child receives nutrients and oxygen through her mother's umbilical cord. But all the digestive and the urinary and the respiratory systems are functioning and practicing. The baby swallows and urinates. She breathes by filling her lungs with amniotic fluid and then expelling it. The heart is beautifully formed with delicate valves between the 4 vessels, just like we always will have all our lives. And a healthy baby at 15 weeks is a very active baby. The baby, unless she's asleep, kicks and waves her arms. We always see this during ultrasound examinations. The fetal spine is so intricate, so delicate, the way it lies curved along the wall of the uterus. We watch the baby plant her feet on the uterine wall and push and stretch. It's so beautiful to watch. Sometimes we see a little delicate hand come up and we see all 5 little fingers waving. We see the baby scratch, and we can even watch the baby suck her thumb. All happening in the darkness of the womb at a time in gestation when a baby can be legally aborted in any state in the United States, all through 40 weeks, really. We see in the little bones of the leg meeting at the joints. So supple, so mobile. Again, a marvel, an absolute marvel of complexity and humanity. At 15 weeks, the brain is, the frontal lobes, ventricles, and thalamus are filling the brain. And we see the baby's profile, which is so endearing in its perfection. The little sloping nose, the distinct upper and lower lips, the eyes that open and close on that impenetrable darkness of the womb. With 3D and 4D ultrasound now at 15, we can see the fetal face in exquisite detail. We can even pick out features that we recognize in our family members. And we can watch the thoughtful frowns and the bright smiles that are going to delight parents after birth. These are the patients that I work with every day as a radiologist. I look at their images in my professional and my volunteer work. They are clearly human, clearly alive, no longer mysteriously hidden from the eyes and knowledge of man, but visible in all their amazing humanity, compelling our sympathy and asking for our solidarity. Asking us, as it were, to consider them not the disposable other, but valuable members of our human family. By virtue of their humanity, equal in worth, equal in dignity, equal in importance. Equality must begin here, with my patients, in the womb, if it is to begin at all. Thank you.
Thanks, Gracie. If I can invite our other panelists to come on up here. We, on our Uber ride on the way over, we were with a few staff, and a few of our staff are expecting right now, and we got to hear stories of little jabs in one of the mothers' tummies, and I can't help but think about that as we're hearing all of these stories from Gracie at 15 weeks, the development of the baby. So next, we will hear from Carrie Severino, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with Carrie. She is the Chief Counsel and Policy Director of the Judicial Crisis Network, co-author with Molly Hemingway of the best-selling book Justice on Trial, The Kavanaugh Confirmation and the Future of the Court. An expert on the confirmation process, Mrs. Severino has been extensively quoted in the media and regularly appears on TV. I'm sure you all have seen her. Carrie writes and speaks on a wide range of judicial issues, including the constitutional limits on government, on our issues, and many other things. You may or may not know that she was a law clerk to Justice Clarence Thomas and also to Judge David Sentil of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, that she's a graduate of Harvard Harvard Law School, and has her undergrad in biology as well from Duke University. So without further ado, Carrie, please come on up.
All right. Thank you so much. When I think of the March for Life, one of the I've been going to the march for almost every year, probably since college. But one of the most memorable images I have of it is watching it from inside the Supreme Court building the year that I clerked for Justice Thomas. This is now, that was like 2007. So it's been a few years, and I feel like the types of protests you see at the court have really changed. Back then, it used to be that if you had, 20 people out there in front of the court, we were like, oh wow, check this out. This is a big group. But there were two events that were always a little different. One is there was a group of students that every day would be standing on the front of at the Supreme Court, and they would have a piece of tape over their mouth that said life, and they were just praying there. And I remember thinking, as I'd walk past them every day in and out of the building, and just think of the dedication and the prayers that were sustaining this movement. And then the other, which is sort of on the opposite end, was this annual March for Life. And instead of the maybe 20 people that you might see standing out there, it was just, you kind of can't describe it. You're standing inside of the building, and it's almost like this entire building is being enveloped by waves and just a tsunami of people. So they start midday after everyone finally makes it after the rally in the mall, and then it's just hours of people filing by, and it's the entire street. And see, when you can just feel how different that event is from watching it. In the chambers that Justice Thomas was in it was under construction, so it's not as normal chambers, but they happened to face out the front. So it was really amazing just to pop back and forth different times during the day to see that. It was one of the only years I didn't attend the march because I wasn't able to as a court employee, but I will never forget that image. This year, as people come to the Supreme Court, it's going to be one of the most significant years, I think, for the march yet. We often have had cases coming before the Supreme Court that have touched on abortion in various ways, that are taking, and the Supreme Court loves to kind of work in stepwise fashion. Well, we have had since 1973 numerous cases that have taken Roe, that have reworked the language, that have rewritten parts of it, that have moved the law in sometimes very, very small but significant ways, like the partial birth abortion case, in the right direction. So this is an issue that the court has been working on, that has been a stepwise process for now nearly 50 years. And yet this term, the court has an opportunity before it like none that it has ever had before with the Dobbs case. The 15-week abortion ban in Mississippi right now presents a really unique opportunity for the court. First, because the ban is actually, I think, squarely within where probably the average American is on abortion. If you look at polling, a lot of people think they like the idea of Roe versus Wade, but if you drill down and ask them what they really think, you realize that most Americans actually have an instinct that, after the first trimester, we don't want abortions going this late. I think especially as Dr. Christie so articulately was describing ultrasounds, and we're all very familiar now with fetal development in a way that we weren't in 1973, right? And so people recognize that this isn't something that we want to see happening at the very least at a late stage in pregnancy. And late being, by the time you're 15 weeks old, we can tell the child's sex by the ultrasound. A lot of women have already seen their babies at that point, even just in the normal course of things. It's also something that a case that uniquely makes it difficult for the court to come to any other conclusion, but that Roe and Casey and their progeny it must be overturned. There isn't this is, often, as I said, the court likes to move in stepwise fashion. They like to have an opportunity to say, well, maybe we won't extend this precedent that has a problem with it to this case, but in the case before us, we can find a way to allow it to be preserved and still come to what we know is the correct legal result. Well, in this case, we now have a majority of justices in the Supreme Court, thanks particularly to the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett, which we celebrated the anniversary of yesterday. A majority of justices who believe the Constitution must be interpreted according to its original understanding and its original meaning. That approach to the Constitution really makes the question of Roe pretty straightforward and open and shut. There is no question. I think even if you talk to many pro-choice scholars who are honest enough to risk the cancel culture wrath, they will acknowledge that Roe and Casey don't have a lot of constitutional law behind them. There is clearly the original understanding of no aspect of the Constitution was that it prohibited any limitations on abortion. And we know this because for almost all of our American history, up until 1973, the vast majority of states outlawed abortion for most of the pregnancy. So it should be a very easy question for the justices. But we also know that they are going to be under the most intense pressure campaign that maybe the Supreme Court has ever experienced. We're seeing this already in the number of op-eds, in the number of people suggesting that, well, the popularity of the court is falling, and this is just going to be the last nail in the coffin for that. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think there's a lot of Americans who would be relieved to see that the court was willing to stand up to that pressure and do what they know is legally right in the face of it, and that would actually bolster a lot of people's confidence in the court. But needless to say, that's not the way the media is spinning it. We've seen people protesting at the justices' houses, like Justice Kavanaugh, who the day that the response briefs were due in the Dobbs case, had people at his family home protesting, which I really think, again, even a lot of people on the left acknowledge that's a bridge too far when you have young children at home. It's one thing to be protesting in front of the court, and it's another thing to go to a place of residence, and the level of the intimidation and threats is very serious. And we also have seen a huge amount of threats in terms of against the institution of the court, and a lot of people suggesting that there should be changes to the number of justices in the court, and using this case as an example. I know we know that that's not the real reason. They've been asking to add members to the court and pack the court, frankly, since Justice Gorsuch was confirmed, and at every possible intervening inflection point, that it's another good excuse for some of the loud voices and the deep pockets of the dark money left to say, hey, let's pack the court now, and now is our excuse. So they, of course, will use this as an excuse to call for court packing, but on a positive note, that's something that most Americans recognize would be very bad for the court and bad for the country, and I don't think they will have the ability to do so. What worries me is whether they will have the ability to make enough of a threat of it that it will intimidate the justices into maybe coming up with a result in the case that is less than clear, or less than going fully and acknowledging the legal bankruptcy of Roe. We know the court's going to be called political yet again, as they always are, if they vote in a way that the left doesn't agree with. But that's really just name calling. And what we all need to be hoping and praying for is that the court is willing to avoid the actual political result, which would be coming to a conclusion that is not what their legal judgment leads them to, but a conclusion that is based on their fear of what the political consequences might be. I think for those in the pro-life movement, that's also a call to make sure that people understand the real ramifications of this decision, because if the court does overturn Roe, that doesn't give the pro-life movement everything it's wanted and been fighting for the last 50 years. It really just puts the ball back in their courts. It means that instead of every year marching on the Supreme Court in D.C., there should be 50 different marches for life, because the opportunity then will be for the American people to make their own laws on this issue. And that doesn't mean they're going to all look the way that the people in this room would like them to see. We're going to have Texas, and we're going to have Georgia, and we're going to have Mississippi, and states that are enacting pro-life legislation, but you're also going to have states like California and states like New York, states where abortion is legal not only all 9 months, but maybe, as my own governor suggests, a little bit after that, maybe we should be leaving the babies to die after a failed abortion. So there's a long path ahead. But I think that the March for Life has shown that they are up for playing the long game, and I know that that all of us can look forward to that step in the battle with optimism and with encouragement, because I think that will allow the American people to actually have a voice in how they want their laws to look, and hopefully we can make that appeal to the American people to recognize, again, the humanity of the fetus, the equality of the child in the womb. And remember, I think, as we go up to the Supreme Court for this year's March for Life, it'll be after the Supreme Court hears the Dobbs case. They will have already heard the case. They will have already voted on the case. But we know from past experience that's not necessarily the last word. So we need to keep on fighting. We need to keep on talking about this issue, making sure people understand the stakes. But I think it will be hard for those justices, when you look at the Supreme Court building, one of the things I love about it is the inscription underneath the very front of the building. I mean, it says equal justice under law. So I think if we can keep this focus on the significance and the equality of the child in the womb, and keep praying, keep working, and keep fighting for this issue, hopefully we'll have some good news in June that will move us in the right direction and continue to promote that equality under law that the Supreme Court is supposed to stand for. Thank you.
There will be opportunity for questions afterwards. Thank you so much, Carrie, that you just helped us understand things so much more. We're so grateful that you're working with us on these issues. It's just enormously, it's a very big blessing for all of us. So one little thought, and then I'm very excited to introduce you to our last panelist. But I had a young attorney say to me over the course of the last few months that, sometimes you hear of Roe from the other side as quote unquote settled law, but the March for Life itself, when you consider the collectively millions of Americans that have marched over the years with the march, the hundreds of thousands that march past that Supreme Court every year, it shows them that it's not settled law. We don't get smaller. We don't, draw less of a line in the sand. We get bigger every year. And it's so interesting to hear the perception of someone who's actually in the building watching, because do they notice? Yes, they notice. They notice the marchers and our witness. So thank you, Carrie, so much. And I'm delighted to introduce you to my friend, Ryan Baumberger. You all are probably also very familiar with Ryan. I'll just give you a little bit of his bio. Ryan is an Emmy Award-winning creative professional, an international public speaker, a column factivist, in his words, and author of the powerful book, Not Equal, Civil Rights Gone Wrong. He's also the co-founder of Radiance Foundation, a life-affirming organization that illuminates that every life has purpose. Ryan has a very unique perspective on the innate nature of purpose. He's one of 10 children who were adopted and lived in a beautiful, diverse family of 15. Today, as an adoptee and an adoptive father, he's passionate about addressing culture-shifting issues from a fact-based, hope-filled, biblically sound perspective. He and Bethany, his dear wife, founded the Radiance Foundation to research and creatively present challenging social issues through ad campaigns, where he's such a genius on this, multimedia tasks, fearless journalism, and compassionate community outreach. So, Ryan Baumberger, please.
I always find it interesting when people talk about settled law. Minor versus Happersett was settled law. Dred Scott was settled law. Korematsu versus United States. I mean, the list goes on and on. Roe and Doe. When settled law is wrong, change it. So I'm honored to be here with the March for Life. In fact, I have to say, the first time I was ever invited to speak was actually from the founder of the March for Life, Nellie Gray, who was the first one to ever invite me years ago when we started the Radiance Foundation back in 2009. And the first person to ever invite me to speak at a lecture, Jeannie, thank you, at FRC, Family Research Council, also years ago. So we have a whole lot of love for the March for Life and everything you guys do. I am excited about this year's theme, For the March for Life, equality begins in the womb. This has such a deeply personal meaning for me. Many say someone like me should have been aborted, that my life wasn't equal to others. I wasn't exactly planned. My birth mom went through 9 months of a traumatic pregnancy, but courageously chose to be stronger than abortion. She enabled me to be adopted and loved, as you see on my shirt. That's me. I grew up in a tiny little family, 15. I have 6 brothers, 6 sisters. 10 of us were adopted. Not your typical American family, but it was very normal for us. 10 of us who were wrongly considered on many levels less equal than others. Most of us were unplanned. Most of us have either physical or learning disabilities, but none of us were unwanted. Thank heaven our worth is not predicated on our wantedness. Too many in society think so, even though not a single individual here or outside of this room had anything to do with establishing his or her innate worth. My parents, Andrea and Henry Bomberger, weren't deterred by how I came to be, but they were passionately determined to help shape who I was meant to be. If you see here on the screen here, you'll see a beautiful woman. That's my mom. And this is the first moment that she held me. I was 6 weeks old. What people can't tell from a picture is the incredible loss that my mom experienced. See, her father tragically disowned her when my parents adopted me. All he saw was my color, which I personally think is a beautiful hue. He didn't, and said adopting this black child is going to, as he said, ruin your family. So my mother literally lost a father in order to gain a son. Racism, it's inherent in the abortion industry, which was birthed in the vile pseudoscience of eugenics. We hear about systemic racism all the time. Well, let me give you my definition of systemic racism. A government-funded entity that disproportionately kills black lives. Planned Parenthood kills over 300 black lives every single day. In fact, in Manhattan, where Planned Parenthood is headquartered, more black babies are aborted than born alive. For every 1,000 born alive, 1,226 are aborted, according to New York City's latest abortion data. Of course, abortion, regardless of hue of skin, is always a tragedy. But where's the outcry from the woke? I know the Radiance Foundation cries. I know the March for Life cries for those precious lives and for the 860,000 lives each year that are killed under the guise of reproductive freedom. But guess what? Freedom can only exist if we are able to exist. My parents were very countercultural. They were rather quiet people, which is kind of hard to believe because you think, how are you quiet and you have 13 kids? But they were quiet. They let their lives live loudly and speak loudly. They saw abortion for the violent injustice that it was and offered a life-changing, life-altering, beautiful option for lives that would have been so easily discarded based on the misperception of our equality. My dad, that's this man right here. Oh, it's a man who, so many things I could say about this man. I loved him like crazy. He's a man who fully embraced the human dignity of everyone around him. He loved the children that many other men abandoned. I have to say that I lost my father this past January, actually on the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. My dad died after 12 years, a 12-year-long battle with Parkinson's and also the COVID lockdown for those who were in nursing homes and facilities like that. He was locked down for almost a year. But I will tell you, the legacy of love he left behind is strong. He's an incredible man. But my mom recently told me about an instance in college. My dad's friends were all going out to a movie, and his black friends were forced to sit up in the balcony. And so what did my dad do? Something that, of course, makes sense, because anyone who knew my dad would know that he would do this. Even though they protested it, he went up and sat with his friends in the balcony. He not only believed that we were all created equal, he also strove all his life to see that people were treated equally. It's much easier to do when you choose to love. In our family, we were definitely loved regardless of our past, regardless of our struggles, regardless of our beautiful hues of skin. My parents understood fundamentally, and this is something that is so ingrained in my heart, that we are all just one human race. Color isn't what binds us. Love is. So now, I want to show you the love that made this particular picture possible from my parents. This is all of us, this tiny family. This is all of us. 65 strong, although this picture was taken about 6 years ago, so there are 15 more precious lives added through marriage, through adoption, through new births. But see, this photo, which was taken 6 years ago, is made possible because of parents who defied the world's low expectations. It's made possible because of women who chose to be stronger than abortion, like my birth mom. People often ask me, have you met her? And I have not. I searched for her years ago, but over the years I tried to figure out, how do I even thank her? How do I thank this hero in my life? How do I show all the things I've been able to become in my life because of her singular decision? So I wrote a song and I sang the lyrics to this short video that I created as a tribute to her strength. I hope even if I'm not able to meet her face to face, that one day she may see this little video on social media and know that her courage caused beautiful reverberations that will last for generations.
You couldn't see what I would be. It wasn't part of your plan. Stronger than your circumstance, you gave my life a chance, touching the future before it began. You're the reason I am here. I know deep down in my soul, my life has purpose. I know deep down in my soul, my life has purpose.
I know this is part of the DNA of the March for Life. And I'm glad to stand with you. I am that 1% that's used 100% of the time to justify abortion. But the circumstances of our conception don't change the condition of our worth. I could ask you a question. Anybody in here control the circumstances of your conception? By show of hands? Okay, no, none of you. That would be weird. And now, along with my amazing wife, Bethany, and our 4 awesome kiddos, 2 of whom are also adopted, we're able to fight for the most marginalized, the most vulnerable, the most defenseless, the most unequal, the unborn. We're able to fight for mothers and fathers who are daily exploited by a multi-billion-dollar abortion industry. It's why we march. Activists who proudly proclaim their pro-abortion stance are able to do so only because they weren't aborted. Like, for instance, Vice President Kamala Harris. Recently, she tweeted that voting is the right that unlocks all other rights. Not exactly, Madam Vice President. Life is the right that unlocks all other rights. Without life, no other rights matter. Dead people can't vote. The ultimate act of voter suppression, by the way, is killing voters before they're born. Human rights begin when human life begins. Not too long ago, a civil rights movement fought for the personhood and equality promised by our Constitution. Today, the pro-life movement is demanding the same thing. Every human is a person, and every person is a human. It's really that simple. The preamble to our Constitution states so clearly and so powerfully that we secure these blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, those yet to be born. Planned, unplanned, able or disabled, black, white, or any hue in between, every human life has equal and irrevocable worth. What a better, stronger, and more loving society will become when we embrace the truth that equality begins in the womb. Thank you.
Wow. What an amazing panel. Thank you so much, both of you, and also to Dr. Christie. So I hope that this whet your appetite for really a remarkable and historic march this year. So the March for Life will be on January 21st. at noon on the National Mall. Stay tuned for more exciting announcements about that. But even right now, I'm going to announce a few of our speakers that haven't yet been made public. So first, I'd like to share with you that we are going to welcome Kurt Cameron. Those of you who might be close to my age, you might remember him from Growing Pains years ago. A cute little mini or a TV show that he starred in as Mike Seaver, sitcom, an 80s hit sitcom. Since then, Kurt has appeared in dozens of television and movie productions. And this year, he's producing an inspiring film about adoption. So he's going to come and speak to us a little bit about that. He and his wife, Chelsea, met on the set of Growing Pains, and they've been married for 29 years. They have 6 children and are very dedicated to this issue. I'd also like to announce that we have the world's most famous podcast host that will be speaking at the March for Life, Father Michael Schmitz. So Bible in a Year, he never anticipated that this would singularly become the world's most popular podcast, which it was throughout all of January and I think part of February in 2021. He will come and speak to us in person at the rally and also at the Rose Dinner that night. He's our keynote speaker. And last, but certainly not least, we have some musical, even though this is always an interesting thing because of course the March is a somber anniversary where we, are reflecting in the past that we've lost 62 million Americans to abortion and are trying to change hearts and minds and laws. And yet there's a joy to it because we know that we're fighting the human rights abuse of today and all of the young people that are there. There's such a positivity. What else could you put yourself into that could be even more important than something like this issue? And so we do have a musical performer to capture that joy and the emotions that go into the March for Life. This year it is many award winning, so 5-time Grammy nominee, multiple ASCAP Christian Music Singer Songwriter Artist of the Year, 2018 Dove Artist Award Songwriter of the Year, and really many other awards as well, Matthew West. And we have a little video from Matthew right now.
What's up, everybody? Matthew West here. Super excited to announce that I'm going to be performing at the March for Life rally on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., January 21st, 2022 at 11 a.m. I want to encourage you to join me and thousands of other pro-lifers who believe that every life matters, every story deserves a chance to be told. It's important for us to come together and be a voice for the voiceless. I want to sing a little bit of a song that you're going to be hearing at the pre-rally concert. Check this out, okay? And I hope this is our collective heartbeat. Every life deserves a voice. Every child deserves a chance. You are more than just a choice, 'cause there's no such thing as unplanned. God bless you. I'll see you in Washington, D.C.
Just looking at our staff here, so the live stream is supposed to end right at noon. Should we do Q&A still live now? Why don't we go ahead and take one question from the audience, and I will say this, that we'll have some time for media interviews afterwards, and I might ask a question if nobody is brave enough to, because I had a few that came up. Okay, Carrie, will you talk to us a little bit? You mentioned that there's some pressure against the Supreme Court, and can you talk to us just a little bit about really the chaos that Roe has created? I mean, this question of, well, are they going to be political activists? And you hinted at this in your remarks about, what motivated the original decisions in Roe, et cetera. So could you talk to us just a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that a lot of people that gets people annoyed about our current court nomination process is just seeing how political it has become. Because as we've seen in just the last few Supreme Court confirmations have really shown us, you had the drama of Justice Scalia passing away, and then that seat being held open and Justice Gorsuch filling it. We had the Kavanaugh confirmation. Who can forget the stakes that had come to be in that case, that prompted really a national smear campaign to try to prevent him from getting on the court, and Justice Barrett's confirmation, which actually in comparison was pretty calm, but we saw the attacks, even some attacks on her family and her adopted family as well. So it's a state that we don't want to see our country in, where our judges are being put into this process. But the reason they are in these crosshairs is precisely because of things like Roe, and I think Roe and Casey are at the crosshairs of this issue, which is when the justices are taking issues that aren't actually in the Constitution and adding them to the Constitution. That makes them the most important political figures in the nation, because our legislature can't do that. Right. Our president can't do that. It's taking something and constitutionalizing it in a way that a number of the American people, through their elected representatives, can change. That's really the biggest problem that happened in Roe from a constitutional perspective, is it took something that wasn't in the Constitution. The Constitution leaves this type of a question to the states, and it said, no, we're going to just override all of that. When the judges are taking that role on themselves and becoming effectively the uber politicians of the country, we shouldn't be surprised, and Justice Scalia has written articulately about this, we shouldn't be surprised then when they are selected in a manner that starts to look really political, because the question at the end of the day is going to be who is making your most important political decisions. So I do think that the way to turn the temperature down on the Supreme Court, to turn them back into just regular judges, which is what they are. They're obviously highest judges in the land, but they should be simply interpreting the law, not making the law, would be for them to acknowledge this major break with the American Constitution in Roe and say, you know what, we see what has happened. We've seen how that has undermined American law, how that has undermined the politics of the judicial selection process, and we recognize now that the best way is to just go back to what the Constitution itself said and allow then the American people, who under the Constitution have all those reserved rights. What the Constitution doesn't commit to the federal government is reserved to the people, and that puts it back in the American people's camp. And again, that doesn't answer the question fully, because the American people are kind of all over the map on this issue, but that it allows us to then make the case to the American people themselves, and then we'll find that that's going to direct where the country goes in this issue, rather than having unelected judges do so.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, if there's one question from the audience, we'll take one question, and if not, we'll go ahead and call it a wrap. Okay, thank you so much for attending today. We look forward to seeing you in January. Very special thanks to our panelists, as well as to Dr. Christie. I personally learned so much and was so inspired. So God bless you all. Can't wait to see you in January.